MS-13, or Mara Salvatrucha, is one of the world's most notorious and violent gangs. With roots in Los Angeles, the gang has spread throughout Central America and beyond. Known for their brutal acts of violence and ruthless tactics, Mississippi 13 has become a household name synonymous with fear and terror. In this video, we will delve into the world of MS-13, exploring their history, culture, and violent reputation, as well as their impact on communities in the United States and Central America. Through analysis and first-hand accounts from former gang members, law enforcement officials, and community leaders, we will examine the gang's inner workings, including the role of their deadly assassins. We will also look at the efforts made to combat MS-13 and support those affected by their crimes. Join us as we uncover the truth about one of the most dangerous gangs in the world. History of MS-13, also known as Mara Salvatrucha, is a gang that originated in Los Angeles, California in the 1980s. We can trace its roots to El Salvador, a small Central American country racked by civil war. The name Mara Salvatrucha is a combination of three words. Mara refers to the word gang in Salvadoran slang. Salva is short for Salvadoran, and trucha means street smart or alert in Salvadoran slang. Thus, Mara Salvatrucha can be loosely translated as Salvadoran street gang or street smart Salvadoran gang. The name reflects the gang's roots in the Salvadoran community in Los Angeles and its focus on street-level crime and violence. The members of Mara Salvatrucha, or MS-13, are known for their extensive use of tattoos, which often cover their bodies and their faces. Among the most common markings are MS, Salvatrucha, the devil horns, and the names of their cliques. However, in recent years, the gang has moved away from face tattoos, recognizing that these markings can make it more difficult to commit crimes without being noticed. By 2007, this trend was becoming increasingly apparent as MS-13 members started to adopt a more covert approach to their activities, avoiding overt displays of gang affiliation and adopting a more low-key appearance to blend in with the general population. The gang's origins are shrouded in mystery, but it is believed that it formed in the late 1970s and early 1980s during the Civil War in El Salvador. During the Civil War, which lasted from 1980 to 1992, El Salvador was in chaos, with government forces battling leftist rebels for control of the country. Many Salvadorans fled the violence and poverty, seeking refuge in the United States, particularly in Los Angeles. However, the Salvadoran immigrants found themselves marginalized and discriminated against in the largely Mexican-American gang culture of Los Angeles. They banded together for protection and support, forming what would eventually become MS-13. The gang was initially made up of young men from El Salvador who had experienced violence and trauma during the war. They formed tight-knit groups, or cliques, based on their hometowns or regions of origin. These cliques were fiercely loyal and committed to protecting their members at all costs, often traced back to the Pico Union neighborhood of Los Angeles, where many Salvadoran immigrants settled. The gang quickly spread throughout Los Angeles and other cities in California, such as San Francisco and San Diego. By the early 1990s, Mississippi 13 had an estimated 10,000 members in California alone. MS-13 is the tragic outcome of a tragic environment. In the mid-1990s, the U.S. began a program of deportation for foreign-born residents convicted of crimes, sending thousands of gang members back to their countries of birth. This influx of violent and organized criminals overwhelmed Central America's already strained prison systems, leading to increased violence and gang activity. In response to the growing violence inside the prisons, authorities separated gang members, which allowed them to reorganize and rebuild their organizational structures from within the walls. Prisons have become a place of safety and freedom for gang members, providing them access to technology such as cellular phones, computers, and televisions. The MS-13 has used these resources to expand their criminal activities, including car theft, extortion, and drug dealing. The violence of MS-13. As the years passed, the MS-13 evolved into a powerful yet loosely structured gang in the Northern Hemisphere, infamous for their brutal acts. The gang's chilling motto of Mata Roba, Viola Controla became synonymous with their violent reputation. By the beginning of the 21st century, Mississippi MS-13 had established a vast network in almost every U.S. state and several Central American countries, particularly El Salvador. The gang's structure lacked a formal hierarchy, instead operating in small, autonomous groups, making it challenging for law enforcement to curb their influence. MS-13 members committed heinous crimes, including gang wars, murders, prostitution, drug trafficking, human smuggling, and illegally transporting migrants across the U.S.-Mexico border. Additionally, the gang sought alliances with other criminal entities, such as the infamous Mexican drug cartels. MS-13 and MS-18, also known as Mara 18, are two of Central America's most notorious and violent gangs. Their rivalry dates back several decades and is fueled by various factors, including territorial disputes, power struggles, and revenge. The origins of the rivalry between MS-13 and MS-18 can be traced back to the 1980s and 1990s, when Salvadoran immigrants formed both gangs in Los Angeles, California. Initially, the two gangs were allies and worked together to protect Salvadoran immigrants from other gangs in the area. However, the alliance between MS-13 and MS-18 began to break in the late 1990s and early 2000s as the gangs expanded their operations into Central America. As they grew in size and influence, they began competing for territory control, drug trafficking routes, and other criminal activities. Since then, the rivalry between MS-13 and MS-18 has continued to escalate, with each gang carrying out brutal attacks against the other. The conflict has devastated the communities in which the gangs operate, with innocent people often caught in the crossfire. MS-13 is responsible for numerous high-profile crimes, including one of Central America's most gruesome and widely publicized incidents. On December 23, 2004, in Chamelecon, Honduras, Mississippi, 13 attacked an intercity bus mercilessly. The bus was fired upon with automatic rifles, taking the lives of 28 civilian passengers, mostly women and children, and injuring 14 others. MS-13 carried out this massacre as a protest against the Honduran government's plan to restore capital punishment in the country. 6 gunmen sprayed bullets onto the bus, while another climbed aboard and systematically took the passengers' lives as they cried and tried to take cover. In February 2007, Juan Carlos Miranda Bueso and Darwin Alexis Ramirez were found guilty of multiple crimes, including murder and attempted murder. Hebert Anibal Rivera was apprehended in Texas after fleeing the attack. The mastermind behind the massacre, Juan Bautista Jimenez, had his life taken in prison, allegedly by fellow MS-13 inmates. However, Oscar Fernando Mendoza and Wilson Giovanni Gomez could not be convicted due to insufficient evidence. This horrific incident served as a sobering reminder of the extreme violence and brutality that MS-13 is capable of, and the devastating toll it takes on innocent lives. On November 4, 2009, reports emerged of a contract allegedly placed on the life of a federal agent responsible for cracking down on the MS-13 gang's New York factions. According to court documents, Mississippi, 13 members attempted to obtain a high-powered rifle to penetrate the agent's bulletproof vest. Walter Duke Torres, a reputed gang member who tipped off authorities about the plan, informed police that the order for the murder came from MS-13 leadership in El Salvador and that they put him in charge of the operation. The targeted special agent was the lead federal investigator on many federal cases involving numerous MS-13 gang members indicted on various charges. This chilling revelation serves as a reminder of the danger law enforcement officials face in combating organized crime and the extent to which MS-13 is willing to go to protect its operations. In 2021, MacArthur Park in Los Angeles was the site of 2 brutal attacks on transgender women. The attacks sparked outrage from advocacy groups and prompted a significant police presence there. It was revealed that MS-13 members had been collecting a weekly tax from individuals in the park, including the victims, to maintain control over illegal activities within the area. MacArthur Park was a lucrative source of revenue for the gang, and they used violence to maintain their hold over it. The violence against trans women in the area began after the closure of a nearby bar where Latina transgender immigrants would frequent and resort to sex work to survive. One of the victims, Daniela Hernandez, was a Salvadoran immigrant who had lost her job and struggled to pay the weekly fee. She believed the gang targeted her due to her transgender status, After 3 months of paying, she decided to stop paying and was subsequently attacked and stabbed near a lake. She survived but resumed paying the fee. 4 weeks later, she was found in the park with her throat slit and multiple stab wounds. The attacks garnered media attention and resulted in increased police presence, causing MS-13 to relocate their operations to 10th Street. 2 former members of the gang have even come forward to shed light on the brutal violence perpetrated by MS-13. Their interviews provide a rare glimpse into the inner workings of this notoriously dangerous gang. Inside MS-13's hit squads. In the world of organized crime, the idea of hit squads is well established. These specialized units are responsible for targeted assassinations, usually against rival gang members, law enforcement officials, or anyone threatening the organization's power. MS-13, also known as the Mara Salvatrucha, is one of the most notorious gangs that employs such tactics. For MS-13, violence is a tool for exerting control over the communities where they operate. The gang is known for its ruthless tactics, such as extortion, drug trafficking, and murder. Members are expected to follow orders from higher-ups without question, and disobedience can result in severe punishment. As the gang continues to expand, it has entered its second generation, with new members often joining for protection from the escalating violence around them. However, joining the gang is violent and often involves a 13-second beatdown. For older members who want to leave, the internal rules they helped create often prevent them from doing so. The gang punishes desertion with a death sentence, making it hard for members to escape. Even if they manage to leave, their tattoos frequently indicate gang membership and will brand them for life. A day in the life of an MS-13 hitman. As we delve deeper into the operations of MS-13, we begin to understand the typical day of a hitman. Their lives are not glamorous, but are filled with fear, violence, and danger. They receive orders from higher-ranking members of the gang who give them instructions on what needs to be done that day. But what drives a person to become a hitman for MS-13? These rewards are seen as a way to elevate a member's status within the gang and provide them with a sense of power and control. However, these privileges come with a high cost. Hitmen are expected to carry out orders without question and are subject to intense scrutiny and discipline from their superiors. Those who fail to carry out orders or who are perceived as weak or disloyal may face severe consequences, including physical punishment or even death. For some, the cost of these privileges becomes too great, leading them to leave the gang or risk being targeted by their former associates. Former hitmen of MS-13 have been involved in numerous brutal crimes, as highlighted by recent cases of prosecution. For instance, in Los Angeles, members of the gang's Fulton clique were indicted for almost 200 criminal acts, including 7 murders, carried out using machetes, bats, and knives. Prosecutors allege that these crimes were committed by gang members seeking to advance their ranks and deemed their crimes as heinous, cruel, or depraved. When caught and brought to justice, crimes that the MS-13 have committed would most likely result in capital punishment unless a plea deal is made. Even then, it's most likely a life sentence for these hitmen. An example of such a case is Romero Padala, a former hitman for MS-13 who confessed to participating in numerous homicides and other unlawful acts. In August 2019, he pleaded guilty to his involvement in the murders of Carlos Serrano Ramos and Wilson Veleda, drug trafficking, extortion, money laundering, and assault. He also took responsibility for another murder in Indianapolis in 2017, where he took Israel Anibal Mejia Martinez's life with bladed weapons. Law enforcement officials from Columbus and Indianapolis discovered his remains in August 2018. Romero Parada was sentenced to 40 years in prison. Another former hitman, Carlos Ortega, was arrested in 2018 and charged with multiple counts of murder, conspiracy, and drug trafficking. Ortega was a high-ranking member of MS-13 and allegedly committed numerous violent crimes in California. He was sentenced to life in prison at the federal courthouse in Central Islip, New York. In a more recent case, Cruz Alberto Arbangas was convicted and sentenced to at least 30 years in prison for his role in the murder of Wilson Villeda and several other murders. He was the 10th defendant to be convicted and sentenced as part of law enforcement's effort to dismantle the MS-13. Alberto Arbangas was linked to the murders of Ramon Ramos, José Ovilio Ayala Alas, and Salvador Martinez Diaz. Additionally, he was involved in extorting 3 victims, each of whom was forced to pay hundreds of dollars per month or risk harm to themselves and their families. The cases of former MS-13 hitmen, such as Romero Padala, are a stark reminder of the gang's brutal tactics, which rely heavily on violence to assert their dominance and control over territories. Their involvement in heinous crimes testifies to the ruthless nature of MS-13's operations. The impact of MS-13's violence. The communities in which MS-13 operates feel the deep impact of the gang's violence. Their violent crimes have left countless victims and devastated families in frightening neighborhoods. The gang has been known to extort and intimidate residents, and their control over certain neighborhoods has led to a breakdown of social order. One of the most tragic impacts of MS-13 is the toll it takes on young people. The gang actively recruits children and teenagers, luring them with promises of protection, money, and status. Once they are in, leaving can be nearly impossible, as the gang enforces a strict code of loyalty and retribution. Young people who join MS-13 may become involved in criminal activities at a very young age, which can have long-lasting negative consequences for their lives and futures. Law enforcement agencies in the United States and El Salvador have struggled to combat the violent and pervasive influence of MS-13 for a long time. In 2020, the United States Justice Department declared an escalated crackdown on the notorious international criminal gang. It announced its intentions to seek the death penalty against a reputed New York gang leader facing murder charges. The department also made history by bringing terrorism-related charges against an MS-13 member for the first time, and charging alleged leaders of gang cells such as the Hollywood Locos and Los Angeles program. The Trump administration's Justice Department even pledged to go to war against MS-13. As U.S. Attorney David M. DeVillers explained, the motive behind the gruesome crimes carried out by MS-13 was to instill fear in anyone who dared to challenge the gang's power. However, with the conviction and sentencing of MS-13 members, law enforcement officials have sent a clear message to the gang that their existence is under threat. The Salvadoran government, led by President Nayib Bukele, has been implementing a crackdown on the MS-13 and MS-18 gangs, also known as Barrio 18, since 2022. The campaign, known as Opération Jacques or Operation Checkmate, aims to dismantle the gang's criminal activities by targeting their leadership, disrupting their financial networks, and deploying security forces to high-crime areas. The government has also implemented measures to restrict gang communication and financing, such as the use of cell phone jammers and asset seizures. It has initiated a program to provide job training and opportunities to young people in gang-affected areas to reduce the appeal of gang membership. The crackdown has received mixed reactions from civil society and human rights organizations, with some praising the government's efforts to combat gang violence. In contrast, others express concern about potential human rights abuses and the long-term effectiveness of punitive measures. Despite the efforts of law enforcement and governments in the United States and El Salvador, Mississippi, 13 remains a dangerous criminal organization. While the joint crackdown in El Salvador in 2019 and subsequent operations have led to the arrest of thousands of suspected gang members and decreased violence in some areas, the organization remains decentralized. New leaders and members are constantly emerging to take the place of those who have been captured or whose lives have been taken. Their networks and operations can be challenging to track and disrupt, and their use of violence as a control tool makes it difficult to gather evidence and testimony from witnesses and victims. Ultimately, the story of MS-13 is a cautionary tale of the consequences of violence and trauma, and the dangers of allowing marginalized and vulnerable communities to become isolated and excluded from mainstream society. Unless these underlying issues are addressed, gangs like MS-13 will continue to thrive and pose a threat not only to public safety, but to the very fabric of society itself. If you'd like more videos like this, let us know in the comments below. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.